Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you with all the top stories from around the globe, but our big focus continues to be on the Israel-Hamas war. The world's top court has begun its hearings in the genocide case against Israel. South Africa, which has brought this case to the International Court of Justice, has outlined its genocide case against Israel. It wants the court to order Israel to suspend its military campaign in Gaza. It could take weeks before judges arrive at a decision. Israel, which will defend itself on Friday, has reacted furiously to the case, calling it an absurd blood libel. Israel has said it will argue that it's acting under self-defense and doing its utmost to protect civilians in Gaza. Vusi Mandisela, South Africa's ambassador to The Hague, ended day one of the hearing by detailing the country's requests for provisional measures. He requested the measures be considered as a matter of extreme urgency. Among the provisional measures requested include that Israel suspends its military operations in and against Gaza, that Israel ensures its military and any associated groups stop any military operations, that Israel stops killing Palestinian people, that Israel stops displacing Palestinian people from their homes and ensures they have access to food, water, healthcare and basic infrastructure, that Israel take all reasonable actions within their power to prevent a genocide. That's what South Africa has said. In fact, the country says Israel's actions in Gaza are genocidal because they are intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial and ethnic group. South Africa posed a challenge to the International Court of Justice's panel of judges, saying it is hard to think of a case in recent history that has been so important for the future of international law. Towards the end of South Africa's 3-hour oral argument, Vaughan Lowe, one of the lawyers representing the country, said, "Now is not a moment for the court to sit back and be silent, and that its decision would have a bearing on the future of the court itself." Lowe asked the court to grant provisional measures ordering Israel, as we said, to suspend its military campaign in Gaza to prevent further abuses of the rights of Palestinians, while the court considers the full merits of the case. Lowe argued, Israel says that Palestine and Palestinians are not its target, that its aim is to destroy Hamas. But months of continuous bombing, flattening entire residential blocks, and cutting off food and water and electricity and communications to an entire population cannot credibly be argued to be a manhunt for members of Hamas. Addressing the various charges of hypocrisy that have been laid against South Africa, including why it has not brought a charge of genocide against Hamas, Lowe explained that this is a matter for the International Criminal Court and not the International Court of Justice. He said Hamas is not a state and cannot be a party to the Genocide Convention and cannot be a party to these proceedings. Whereas the International Court of Justice hears cases brought by states accusing others of violating their UN treaty obligations, the International Criminal Court tries individuals for crimes including war crimes and crimes against humanity. Lowe concluded by summarizing South Africa's argument when he said, South Africa believes that the publicly available evidence of the scale of the destruction resulting from the bombardment of Gaza and the deliberate restriction of food, water, medicines, electricity available to the population of Gaza demonstrates that the government of Israel is intent on destroying the Palestinians in Gaza as a group and is doing nothing to prevent or punish the actions of others who support that aim. He stressed the point is not simply that Israel is acting disproportionately, the point is the prohibition on genocide is an absolute. The International Court of Justice is in the first of its 2-day hearing of proceedings, as we said, brought by South Africa, accusing Israel of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. A ruling on genocide could take years to prove, but the injunction on the Gaza war that Pretoria has asked the International Court of Justice for could come much sooner. It is an unprecedented case. Experts say this is the first time that the Jewish state is being tried under the United Nations Genocide Convention, which was drawn up after the Second World War in light of the atrocities committed against the Jewish people during the Holocaust.
On Thursday, a proceeding will start in the International Court of Justice in The Hague, whereby South Africa has sued Israel for supposedly genocide. There's nothing more atrocious and preposterous than this claim. Actually, our enemies, the Hamas, in their charter, call for the destruction and annihilation of the State of Israel, the only nation state of the Jewish people. The Convention Against Genocide was enacted by the international community following the worst atrocities of humankind, the Shoah, the Holocaust, which was aimed specifically against the Jews, the Jewish people, in order to eliminate the Jewish race, the Jewish people. In Hamas's charter, it's almost identical in many, many ways. And here, with the hypocrisy of South Africa, we will be there at the International Court of Justice and will present proudly our case of using self-defense under our most inherent right under international humanitarian law, where we are doing our utmost under extremely complicated circumstances on the ground to make sure that there will be no unintended consequences and no civilian casualties. We are alerting, we are calling, we are showing, we are sending leaflets, we are using all the means that international law enables us in order to move out people so that we can unravel this huge city of terror underneath in people's homes, living rooms and bedrooms, mosques and shops and schools.
I want to make a few points absolutely clear. Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population. Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population. And we are doing so in full compliance with international law. The IDF is doing its utmost to minimize civilian casualties, while Hamas is doing its utmost to maximize them by using Palestinian civilians as human shields. The IDF urges Palestinian civilians to leave war zones by disseminating leaflets, making phone calls, providing safe passage corridors, while Hamas prevents Palestinians from leaving at gunpoint, and often with gunfire. Our goal is to rid Gaza of Hamas terrorists and free our hostages. Once this is achieved, Gaza can be demilitarized and de-radicalized, thereby creating a possibility for a better future for Israel and Palestinians alike.
We'll start with an update on the ICJ. Tomorrow, the State of Israel will appear before the International Court of Justice to dispel South Africa's absurd blood libel. We welcome Secretary Blinken's remarks that Pretoria's submission to the ICJ is meritless and, quote, particularly galling, given that those attacking Israel continue to openly call for the annihilation of Israel and mass murder of Jews. This despicable intervention to save the skin of the Hamas rapist regime is, as Secretary Blinken noted, also a distraction from important efforts to bring back the hostages, protect civilians, and prevent this conflict from spreading. We, the State of Israel, will not be distracted as we continue pursuing those essential goals. The State of Israel remains committed to and operates in accordance with international law, directing our military operations solely against Hamas and other terrorist organizations.
All right, so the matter is now before the world's top court, the International Court of Justice, with Israel being accused by South Africa of carrying out a genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, an allegation that Israel has furiously rejected. What does all of this mean? What can we really expect from the UN court in the next couple of days? To understand this, let's now go across to our guests. Joining me on Global Lens tonight, a warm welcome to Anat Bernstein, President of the Israeli Asia Chamber of Commerce, Lev Aaron, Israeli columnist and journalist, and Irina Sukuman, national security and geopolitical analyst. She joins us live from New York. Thank you so much to all my guests for coming back on Global Lens. Anat Bernstein-Reich, let me begin with you. Now, I know what Israel's stance on these allegations is. Israel is going to defend itself before the International Court of Justice tomorrow. But some of the arguments that have been made by South Africa before the ICJ are very, very strong. Amongst other things, South Africa says that even though Israel claims that it does not want to target Palestine and Palestinians, is only trying to destroy Hamas, but the continuous bombing, flattening of entire residential blocks, cutting off food, water, electricity and communications to an entire population cannot be argued to be a manhunt for just members of Hamas. And then they say the point is not that Israel is acting disproportionately. The point is the prohibition on genocide is an absolute, and the world and the ICJ must not be a silent spectator. Even though Israel has maintained all along that we are acting in self-interest and we will continue to do whatever it takes to destroy Hamas and to secure the Israeli citizens, do you not believe that that stage has come where Israel is under tremendous international pressure with the country which ironically suffered the Holocaust during the Second World War is now being accused of carrying out a genocide against an entire people?
Good evening, Nea. It's very unfortunate that South Africa is playing into the hands of Hamas, and we always call Hamas the proxy of Iran. Now South Africa is the proxy of the proxy. And true, Israel or the Jews suffered genocide, and actually the Convention of 51 that is the base for the hearing that we have today is based on the genocide of the Jewish people. And we are part of this convention. That's why we are coming to court and we respect the court. However, genocide needs intention. And if we look throughout this war, of course, there is no intention of Israel to eliminate the Palestinians. On the contrary, we time and again, and each of our chief of staff and the president and the prime minister and the defense minister, all of them very clearly state that this war is against Hamas. Hamas is here to blame. Hamas is genociding its own people. They are going into the civilians. We spoke about it so many times. You see the infrastructure just in the background of on the footage that we see. This is the infrastructure that Hamas created in residential buildings, below the buildings, to conduct war against Israel. It is Hamas charter, and you mentioned it in your background, that Hamas charter is to kill the Jews. They have an explicit intention to kill the Jews. So it's really hypocrisy to come to us after what they've done, after they showed what they want to do, and they already did, and come to Israel and attack us for a genocide. Israel is doing the best they can not to hurt civilians. The fact that we have asked the population from the north to move to the south means that we don't want to hurt civilians. I mean, it's very simple to send aircraft and to bomb everything if really genocide is the point, and not at all. You can see a lot of footage how the Israeli soldiers are taking care of elderly and young people that they meet on the way, and they treat them so well. So to come and say it's a genocide, it's so much not what the Israelis are all about. And you know what? Maybe the hearing and tomorrow's hearing, where Israel will present itself, will show the world what really Israel is doing to protect the civilians. When you spoke about humanitarian aid, we are allowing humanitarian aid to go into the strip, but guess who is stealing it from their people? Hamas. When the truck is coming inside the Gaza Strip, Hamas militants, terrorists, I would say, go and pick those trucks and don't give it to their own people. And they very clearly said it to the media. It's more important for us to give food to our terrorists because they work hard, and the people should manage otherwise. So, I mean, I think that Israel tomorrow will show the world that all those shouts of genocide, it's really hypocrisy, and it's really upsetting to not allow us to defend ourselves from this evil that grow just in our neighborhood. And I'm sure that this court will find, and I believe in this court, that they will find Israel, of course, not
guilty of genocide. Okay.
Not guilty of genocide.
Let's just put this into perspective for our viewers. While it could take years for the court to determine whether this is indeed a case of genocide, and the court will need to examine the full merits of the case, but what we are looking at and examining at the moment is a crucial 2-day hearing that started today with South Africa, which has brought the case against Israel, laying out its case, making its preliminary arguments as to why it believes Israel is guilty of a genocide in Gaza. Tomorrow, as we said, Israel will get a chance to reply, to defend itself. At the end of the second day, we may know which direction this case might move in and what the International Court of Justice has in mind. Remember, it is some emergency measures that South Africa is demanding. The topmost amongst them is that Israel should be asked to immediately suspend its military operation in Gaza. Let's not forget that the rulings of the International Court of Justice are not exactly binding. So we'll discuss all of this in greater detail with Anat, Lev and Irina on the other side of this very short break.
Ram's Ayodhya rebuilt. Ram Lala's Pran Pratishtha. Countdown to January 22nd. Dateline Ayodhya. Catch the mega coverage only on News9 Live.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We're discussing the big case that has been brought against Israel before the International Court of Justice, with the country being accused of genocide in Gaza. Let me now go across to Lev Aaron. Lev, this is an unprecedented case, and there is a huge irony here. Why do we say that? As I said at the start of the show, this is the first time that the Jewish state of Israel is being tried under the United Nations Genocide Convention, which was drawn up after the Second World War in light of the atrocities that were committed against the Jewish people during the Holocaust. Today, the same Jewish people, Lev, are being accused of carrying out a genocide of the Palestinian people, of trying to annihilate the Palestinian population in Gaza. You've heard the principal arguments that have been made by South Africa today, which says that you can hardly claim that you're going just after Hamas when you are relentlessly bombing the entire enclave, and when you're cutting off food, water, electricity supplies to an entire population. You have flattened the entire Gaza Strip. This is nothing but an annihilation of the Palestinian people. How would you respond to some of the arguments that have been made by South Africa today? Of course, we have to keep in mind the fact that the ICJ's rulings are not binding on any country, but they can be very damaging.
Thank you for inviting me, first of all. I think we must not fall into a pit of self-deception. Hamas and Iran and South Africa, they all know that Hamas started this war. They know it. They know also that Hamas is much closer to Nazi Germany than anything they can prove about Israel. They also know it, because Hamas openly hates Jews, and we will not read the Article 22, I think, of Hamas. So it is a matter of politics. I think any of us who saw South Africa reaction to Ukrainian war with Russia, we saw that South Africa was not blaming Russia or Putin for anything, even when terrible stories came from Bucha and from other places. So for most Israelis, it is simply a sheer politics, and it does not merit our attention or consideration. Unfortunately, we have to go to The Hague to defend ourselves as Israelis, but I do believe that after tomorrow, we will see again, the verdict will not be there. As you said before, it will take some time. But I think we will see some clues that the verdict will not be anti-Israeli one.
Okay, you sound very optimistic and confident. We'll have to wait and see if the ruling bears out your optimism. All eyes will be on the International Court of Justice, which may or may not say something at the end of the second day of this hearing. Let me now go across to Irina. Irina, as has been mentioned on this show already, we don't expect the International Court of Justice to say right away whether Israel is guilty of carrying out a genocide. That is a hearing that could go on for weeks, months, or even years. However, what South Africa is specifically demanding are some emergency measures, which primarily include that Israel completely suspend its military operations in Gaza, stop displacing Palestinian people from their homes, ensure they have access to food, water, healthcare and basic infrastructure, and that Israel takes all reasonable actions within its power to prevent a genocide. How do you see this hearing panning out? Whatever Israel's stand may be, like I put this question to Anna, do you not believe, Irina, that Israel is under tremendous international pressure today? For weeks together now, the world has asked for a ceasefire in Gaza. Now Israel is being accused of genocide before the International Court of Justice.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me back. As someone who studied international humanitarian law under the South African Judge Goldstone, the author of the infamous Goldstone Report, and certainly not a fan of Israel, I can tell you that based on everything that I've learned in that academic exercise, not only is South Africa failing to meet the definition of genocide by the United Nations, even in its presentation of the initial case, but it will likely fail even in the request for emergency measures, for the simple reason that it's failing to meet the basic definitions, and because what it is doing is a transparent political stunt that will not bring any more support aside from those who are already inclined to believe that Israel needs to stop. But it will not generate any political support among new countries, new communities. Why am I saying that? Very simple. Let's look at the political context of these accusations. South Africa is facing tremendous internal problems, which include widespread corruption, infrastructure failings, political upheaval with the ANC, the pro-liberation anti-apartheid party, literally falling apart, and internal strife. South Africa is a member of BRICS, but it has not been able to convince any of its fellow members to support this measure, not even Russia and China, which have been notoriously supportive of Hamas as a political movement and critical of Israel. All of this points to the fact that even these countries understand that this action has no legal merit and will likely lead to embarrassment for South Africa. However, what it is designed to do is to generate a lot of bad publicity for Israel in the short term, to galvanize those who are already on board with the fact that with the claim that Israel needs to stop immediately, and it will also lend support to Western academics who have been infiltrated with pro-Hamas ideologies to make these claims around the Western world to students in academia and soft power institutions. So this is an instance of lawfare. Lawfare is an effort to resolve political problems through courts in a way that chills, that brings a chilling political effect, and that is intended to pressure to pressure one of the target parties through informational means. It's an abuse of legal process. in that sense. And this is exactly what South Africa is doing, and this is why the United States and former British ministers and many others have come out and saying that even bringing this claim to the ICJ has no legal merit, and it's completely preposterous.
Okay, this may not have much legal merit according to you, though we'll have to wait and see what the ICJ says. But what about the issue of morality and the fact that there is a lot of international pressure that is building up for Israel? Anat, let me come back to you at this point. Now, I'm not sure how South Africa can be accused of being an apologist for either Iran or Hamas in all of this, but since Israelis like yourself are accusing South Africa of hypocrisy and asking why it has not brought a charge of genocide against Hamas, I just want to put this out before our viewers that this is the counter argument that South Africa has made. That as far as actions by Hamas are concerned, that is a matter for the International Criminal Court, not the International Court of Justice. Why? Because Hamas is not a state. It cannot be a party to the UN Genocide Convention, and therefore it cannot be a party to the proceedings at the ICJ. The ICJ hears cases that are brought by states accusing others of violating the UN treaty obligations, whereas the International Criminal Court tries individuals for crimes including war crimes and crimes against humanity. You want to respond to that distinction that South Africa is making?
Yeah, you're right. Procedurally, you're right. Hamas is not a country. They are not member to this convention, so they cannot be tried in this court. I agree on that. But they are a hypocrite because they are not doing anything against Hamas. I mean, they actually represent Hamas. They represent the interest of Hamas that Israel will stop the fighting. They don't tell Hamas, and again, maybe you don't hear about it, but almost daily, Hamas is launching rockets even now. 2 days back, a huge rocket barrage was on Israel. So Hamas continues their attacks on Israel all the time. And this is indiscriminate attacks because they send it on civilian population all the time. The world is not talking about it. The world is not talking about their friends Hezbollah from the north that are destroying buildings and neighborhoods in the north of Israel. And eventually it's all interconnected. So somehow they found a platform that they can harass us, Israel, and try to influence Israel to stop the activity in Gaza. But eventually, if Sinwar and his team will surrender or at least leave Gaza and return the hostages that by now we are over 95 days since they were taken captive, Israel will stop, okay? We have two missions: to stop Hamas and to get our hostages back. It's very simple. If they really want, if South Africa really wanted this ground operation to stop, here is a solution.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's as simple as that, because yes, of course, one of the stated objectives of this war is the release of all the hostages, but at the same time, Israel has said categorically that we will not stop this war until we've achieved complete victory over Hamas, and many have even wondered what that even means. We will continue this conversation on the other side of a quick break. Stay with us.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met.
What certainly comes across is the lack of political will.
If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women, or the women reservation will need to be the needful?
Without any reservation, the women can fight.
And the gang issue is at the heart of it. And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface, but not the living people?
2070 तक भारत नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य हासिल करेगा।
There's certainly a wall of capital coming into the clean tech, climate tech space, not just in India but across the world.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है Money9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
Bangalore traffic is an example of something that has gone wrong with our system.
We have more than 50 flyovers in Bangalore city. If flyover is a solution to traffic problem, Bangalore should not have traffic problem.
According to TomTom Traffic Index 2022, Bangalore is ranked as the second worst city in the world when it comes to traffic.
The speed limit at the ORR is 80 kilometers per hour, but our vehicle has only moved 10 kilometers per hour.
What Bangalore needs is a surgery, but what we have been offered repeatedly are band-aids.
Only on the world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the genocide case against Israel before the International Court of Justice. Let me go across to Lev Aaron at this point. Lev, you know, I am not suggesting that at the end of the second day of the hearing, the International Court of Justice is going to come to the conclusion that Israel is indeed guilty of genocide in Gaza, but there is a possibility that the court could agree with South Africa and ask Israel to suspend this military operation in Gaza. We've discussed how these rulings may not be legally binding on any country, but what about the moral pressure such a ruling is likely to bring to bear on Israel? What are your thoughts on that? Also, how do the Israeli people feel about the irony of the Jewish state today being accused of carrying out a genocide?
I will start with the second question. We are used to the fact that now the Palestinians are the new Jews. And you can see it in many aspects. And very often Israel is scolded for what it is doing to the Palestinians because the Palestinians are the new Jews. So in this sense, we are not surprised. We are sad, but we are not surprised. As to the first question, I think that if anyone thinks that the court in The Hague will have any effect on the actual war in Gaza, I'm afraid this moment has gone. It will not happen. Even if things that we do not predict now will happen and the court will tell Israel to do this or that, Israel has its own domestic politics, and Israel will sacrifice The Hague and will not sacrifice its own mission in Gaza. This is about the first question. I think we are putting a lot of focus on the procedure and the fact that Hamas is not a state, and therefore South Africa says that it is not the right court to judge Hamas. But also South Africa is banking on Hamas numbers when it says that 23,000 Palestinians were killed in the war. So for all practical reasons, South Africa is also treating Hamas as a full state. So maybe as far as procedure is concerned, it is okay for South Africa to run away and to be hypocritical about the question, but I don't think the normal person will believe South Africa. And also to this point, we need to remember that 2 or 3 days before the war between Russia and Ukraine, Putin said in his speech that the Ukrainians are not people, and he has the right to go to war against Ukraine because Ukrainians and Russians are the same people. So he has, in a way, the right to destroy this, let's say, ethnic or racial or religious group in Ukraine. And still, we see that South Africa is still sitting on the fence as far as Russia is concerned. So if, as far as Hamas is concerned, South Africa can sit on the fence because of the procedure, how can South Africa sit on the fence as far as Putin is concerned? Thank you.
Okay, Lev, I do not disagree with you on the point that you're making about Putin's war against Ukraine. Those are, of course, atrocities that are being committed against the Ukrainian people, which cannot be justified. However, the question that many would then ask is, do 2 wrongs make a right? But let me go across to Irina at this point. Irina, you're in the United States. Yes, the US has been and continues to be the staunchest ally for Israel and the Netanyahu government during this very unpopular war. But we also know that the Biden administration has been feeling the heat because of the growing death toll in Gaza. Time and again, top officials of the United States, including President Biden himself and Antony Blinken, who's been visiting the Middle East, have been at pains to say that Israel needs to do a lot more to minimize civilian casualties. And we keep talking about how there is an election this year in the United States, and there are many in the US who are very unhappy with Biden for his unstinting support to Netanyahu's war. There are many Democrats today who are questioning Biden's, unqualified support to Israel's war. Therefore, I'm going to ask you this question. If tomorrow the ICJ does, in fact, hypothetically, deliver a ruling which is not favorable to Israel, even says suspend your military campaign, do you really believe that that will have absolutely no impact on Israel's ally, the United States? As I keep saying, Biden has an election to face this year.
Well, Biden's concern with respect to this issue has actually been less internal domestic pressure from these various corners and more the fact that his administration is concerned about Iran, and some of the pressure is more about trying to settle the issue with Gaza and not give Iran a political scoring point in the face of the Palestinian issue. Iran has been very much trying to make it its mantle. But let's look at the political context. The pro-Gaza demonstrations, pro-Hamas demonstrations in the Arab states have died down over time, in part because the governments of those countries are starting to realize that Hamas is actually not just a political card, but a danger to the region. And its activities that many have compared to ISIS are likely to be just as disruptive. In the United States and European countries, you have had a group of Hamas supporters that have been continuing these demonstrations, but they have been consistently blocking key infrastructure, interrupting freedom of movement, and being disruptive to political and hearings and personal life of various U.S. officials. None of that is polling particularly well among average Americans who may want to avoid great humanitarian damage in Gaza, but who do not like to be manipulated by very aggressive entities and outright pro-Hamas groups. Finally, I'm going to be cynical here, but any pressure on Biden in terms of a long-term outcome is actually beneficial to Israel, because if all these people who claim to prioritize this issue end up not voting for Biden in the upcoming elections, this will hand a victory to a Republican candidate, and the Republican administrations have been traditionally tougher on Iran and tougher on pro-Iranian proxies such as Hamas than democratic administrations. So for Israel, I think it's trying to balance being seen as sensitive to U.S. interests and concerns, because it is a vital partner and its help has been greatly appreciated, with the political reality that the immediate problems still need to be managed, that Hamas, while it remains in power, is still a danger, and that while it can try to balance different types of operations in the future, the political reality may change drastically after November.
Okay, very interesting perspective from Irina, who says that whatever the outcome of the US presidential election later this year, it could very well be a win-win for Israel, because while the Biden administration has offered unstinting support to Israel's war in Gaza, if a Republican comes to power, and well, most believe it is going to be Donald Trump, if it is going to be a Republican indeed, then it could even be better for Israel, because traditionally and historically, the Republicans have actually been tough on countries like Iran, and that works to Israel's advantage. However, what we will have to wait to see is whether there is any significant change in the Biden administration's stance on the war between now and November, when the US presidential elections are actually slated to be held. Let me go back to Anat at this point. Anat, of course, you're entitled to your opinion on whether South Africa is right in bringing this case of genocide against Israel before the ICJ, whether it's been hypocritical in not bringing a similar case against Hamas. But, you know, while I understand that most polls suggest that a majority of Israelis support this war against Hamas, but, you know, Lev said on this show very interestingly, he said it's sad but true that the Palestinians are the new Jews. And you know, there have been pockets of resistance and protests against this war, even in Israel. We have seen some Israelis holding up placards, banners and posters saying, and I'm not making this up, saying, my grandfather did not survive Auschwitz to see Gaza being bombed. Today, the very same Jewish people who survived the Holocaust are being accused of carrying out a genocide. What would you say to that young woman who came to a protest site in Tel Aviv holding up that placard saying, my grandfather did not survive Auschwitz to see Gaza being bombed?
People have different opinion, and it's okay. I mean, it's her opinion, and we have very left wing people that are against Israel operation in Gaza. We are a democracy, and you hear opinions to the right and to the left. And yes, many people here, not many, there are a group of left parties that believe that we need to stop the ground operation, and it's their opinion, and I can appreciate their opinion. But when Lev referred to Palestinians are the new Jews, I mean, I don't agree with him. I would agree that the Palestinians don't have a state, and I think that eventually they need to have a state. That's the similarity. For years, the Jews didn't have a state, and in 1948, we got our own state. And I think that down the line, the Palestinian needs their own state. So this is the only way I can resemble between us and them. I don't agree on many other things. I don't agree, of course, that there is a genocide here, if that's what you're trying to imply here on the relations between Jews and Palestinians.
Okay, but it's certainly heartening to hear an Israeli citizen say that yes, the Palestinians need their own state, because for the longest time they have said that the two-state solution is the only solution. But then there are many like the far-right elements in the Netanyahu government who seem to be dead opposed to that. But well, all of that is a long way off For now, of course, the world is hoping and praying for this war to end because too many people have died on both sides. On that note, Anat Bernstein-Reich, Lev Aaron, Irina Sukerman, thank you so much to all three of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. All right, from the Israel-Hamas war, let's now turn our attention to the United States, which, as we said, is headed for, well, the much-anticipated presidential contest later this year. The Republican primary race ahead of this year's presidential elections is hotting up and getting more and more bitter. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has bowed out of the race, leaving the GOP contest with one less candidate. Christie, known for his criticism of frontrunner Donald Trump, made the announcement in New Hampshire. Christie's departure has stirred the political arena as he was seen as the most vocal critic of Trump in the race. This move is expected to impact the dynamics of the contest, with some hoping it will help opponents of the former president rally behind a single candidate. Now, while announcing this decision, Chris Christie said, "It is clear to me tonight that there isn't a path for me to win the nomination, which is why I'm suspending my campaign tonight for President of the United States." In response, Trump said he's not exactly worried about Christie dropping out. He said he agreed with comments Christie made on a hot mic ahead of that announcement. The stage is now set for a fiery showdown between two key contenders, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, in the upcoming Iowa caucuses, scheduled to be held on the 15th of this month. The two candidates hurled insults at each other at Wednesday night's debate, repeatedly calling each other liars. Ron DeSantis said, and I quote, "We don't need another mealy-mouthed politician who just tells you what she thinks you want to hear just to try to get your vote and then to do her donors' bidding." In response, Nikki Haley said he's upset that his campaign is exploding. The verbal sparring continued as the two candidates accused each other of lying throughout the debate. The heated exchange showcased the high stakes of the Iowa caucuses, less than a week away. Standing at an arm's length from each other, DeSantis and Haley both sought a strong debate performance in Iowa without their lower polling rivals by their side to lift their campaigns in the final days before next Monday's caucuses, where standout performance could offer the much required momentum as the two vie to emerge as the primary alternative to Donald Trump, still the Republican Party frontrunner. With the absence of former President Trump for the fifth time from the Republican debate, the focus was largely on the intense rivalry between Haley and DeSantis rather than the clear frontrunner in the race. Remember, the former president has the support of 49% of Republicans in a nationwide poll, which is way ahead of Haley, who's in second place at 12%. Haley and DeSantis both have offered muted criticism of Trump when asked whether the volatile former president has the character to be president again. Haley said, "I agree with a lot of his policies, but his is not my way. I don't have vengeance, I don't have vendettas, I don't take things personally." As the Iowa caucuses draw near, the contest is becoming more and more intense.
And it's clear to me tonight that there isn't a path for me to win the nomination, which is why I'm suspending my campaign tonight for President of the United States. I know, and I can see it from some of the faces here, that I'm disappointing some people by doing this. People who believe in our message and believe in what we've been doing. I also know, though, it's the right thing for me to do. I am going to make sure that in no way do I enable Donald Trump to ever be president of the United States again. And that's more important than my own personal ambition. And if that is what we have there, then people are going to remain angry, remain divided, and become even more exhausted than they are today.
Okay. Our next story is about the growing closeness between China and the Maldives. This, of course, comes at a time of strained ties between India and the Maldives. Chinese President Xi Jinping and the Maldivian President Mohamed Muizzu have elevated their countries' relations from bilateral ties to a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership. The two leaders held talks in Beijing, resulting in the signing of 20 key agreements covering various sectors. The Maldivian President's office said 20 key agreements were signed between the governments of the two countries, and the two presidents witnessed the signing ceremony. Amongst these agreements, which is a crucial pact on tourism cooperation, reflecting the shared commitment to boost the tourism sector in the Maldives. Other agreements cover disaster risk reduction, blue economy initiatives, and increased investment in the digital economy, as well as collaboration on China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, this visit comes amid a major diplomatic row between the Maldives and India, stemming from highly derogatory and objectionable remarks made by some Maldivian ministers recently against Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Indians in general. Historically, India, the largest tourist market for the Maldives, has seen cancellations in recent days due to this diplomatic row. The Maldivian government recently suspended 3 deputy ministers for those remarks, but the damage has been done, it seems.
President Xi Jinping called President Mohamed Muizzu of the Maldives an old friend on his first state visit to China on Wednesday. It's a sign of an upgraded relationship between the two countries, as China sets the stage for further investment in the Indian Ocean archipelago by agreeing to a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership. Muizzu took office in November after winning on his India Out platform, in which he cast China's regional rival as a threat to sovereignty. His government has since asked dozens of locally based Indian military personnel to leave while talking up opportunities for Chinese investors, despite already owing Beijing around $1.4 billion. Relations between India and China nosedived after both sides clashed in the Western Himalayas in 2020, resulting in the death of 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese troops. The relationship between the Maldives and India further soured over the weekend after 3 now suspended deputy ministers from the island nation disparaged India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on social media. On Monday, one of India's largest travel platforms suspended flight bookings to the tourism-dependent country. Xi said he backed increasing the number of direct flights between the two countries in a potential boon for the Maldives' travel and tourism sector. The Maldives owes around 20% of its public debt to China, according to World Bank data, making Beijing its biggest bilateral creditor ahead of Saudi Arabia and India, which it owes over $120 million to each.
And finally, which passport do you hold? You might want to give this one a thought. If you've ever wondered about the power of a passport, this is a story that would interest you. Some passports are like golden tickets granting access to a world of destinations. Now, according to the International Air Transport Association, the world's most powerful passports at the beginning of 2024 belong to France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Singapore and Spain. These lucky passport holders can pack their bags for a whopping 194 countries without needing a visa. For the past 5 years, Japan and Singapore have been, ranked number 1 on this list. However, this time the European nations are shaking things up a little bit, with Finland and Sweden, along with South Korea, tied for the second place, offering visa-free entry to 193 destinations. Austria, Denmark, Ireland and the Netherlands have secured the third spot with access to 192 destinations, again visa-free. The Indian passport has been ranked 80th on the list, allowing its citizens to explore 62 countries without a visa. These include popular vacation destinations like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand and others. India shares its 80th spot with Uzbekistan, while India's neighbor Pakistan has got the 101st ranking. Christian Kylan at the Henley Passport Index says there's a widening gap in global mobility. Despite more travel freedom overall, the difference between the top and bottom of this index is at an all-time high. He says the average number of destinations that travelers can visit without a visa has nearly doubled from 58 in 2006 to 111 in 2024. The top-ranked countries now enjoy the luxury of traveling to a staggering 166 more destinations visa-free. Compare that to a country like Afghanistan, which sits at the bottom of the list, offering access to only 28 countries without a visa, and spare a thought for Syria, with visa-free access to just 29 destinations, holding the second lowest position, followed by Iraq with 31 and other countries in the region. Now, in a world where borders matter, passports play a crucial role. As the Henley Passport Index shows, some passports do open doors to a world of endless possibilities. And with that, it's a wrap on Global Lens tonight. If you have been, thanks so much for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow. Good night.
Pakistani spy agency ISI's sinister plan to target India. Training women to honey trap top civil and military officials. Counter honey trapping ops initiated by India. But gullible victims still caught in the web.